This episode is brought to you by IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. IT Pro TV offers an on-demand course library with more than 3,300 hours of content. Watch on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for Teams with a special offer for Security Weekly listeners. Visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly to start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off a standard or premium IT Pro TV membership using the code SECWeekly30. Stop attackers from domain credential theft and lateral movement with a 99% success rate by using artificial intelligence to control the attacker's perception of the environment. Javelin Networks is the world's first endpoint intrusion containment platform to protect domain networks. Javelin detects targeted attacks and breaches by obfuscating Active Directory, domain controllers, domain identities, domain credentials, and all domain resources. It only takes one compromised machine to jeopardize the entire organization. Don't be a victim. Visit javelin-networks.com and request a demo of AD Protect today. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. We've had to actually reschedule a guest, but because our hosts on this network are awesome, and while I was having a camera put in places where we won't speak of on the air, Doug White was actually preparing for the show today. So we're going to continue the show. Now, before we get started, Doug, I'd like to welcome one of our newer sponsors, ServiceNow. Some of you might have seen Brendan O'Connor on the program earlier. I think it was last week. And there is an upcoming webcast with Brendan where Brendan will step into the hot seat. And basically, we're going to talk about how you've been overwhelmed by the noise and alerts in your environment and some things that ServiceNow can do to help you. Some of you may not recognize necessarily ServiceNow as, hey, wait, they're a security company? Sure. They've got some security solutions that I was excited to hear about, and so we brought them on as a partner of the show. Their ad is kind of cool, and we're still working on producing some of the ads from some of our newer sponsors, but they say if you're overwhelmed by the sheer volume and noise of alerts, struggling to define priority while searching for context, wondering why we're still playing telephone while attackers invest in technology to ease their efforts. It's time to make a stand and demand a different approach. Imagine spending your day doing valuable work you crave. It's possible today with ServiceNow. Visit servicenow.com/SOAR, S-O-A-R, kind of ironic today, to get more information and make the case for your better approach to security orchestration and automation, which I really like as this emerging category, solidifying itself as a category. You should overcome your fear of automation and use security orchestration or automation in your environment and check out the offerings from ServiceNow, which now you cannot forget.
That's right.
Their
You're
URL,
never gonna forget that.
servicenow.com/SOAR.
SOAR.
It's S-O-A-R, though.
It's
not
S-O-A-R. It's not
S-O-R-E.
prolapsed or anything like that. Yeah, there's not stuff hanging around. Yeah, it's like, oops.
Oh. So, Doug, you've got some enterprise security news to talk about.
Well, I did. They told me that you might not live.
But I'm here. I'm feeling.
He's fine. He seems perfectly
feeling
fine.
much better
It's
now.
like, yeah. I mean, I was surprised. I didn't know if you'd be here or not. They said you could come in, all fentanyled up and be like,
woohoo!
Security. Yeah.
It turns out not many people notice when I'm inebriated of any kind. Because that's just how I roll.
That's how they train spies, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got to be able to drink like a whole bottle of vodka because the other you won't get drunk when they're trying to get you drunk. And so yeah. See, Paul is fentanyl resistant,
apparently.
Okay. So first and foremost, one of the things while you're watching the Super Bowl on Sunday, if you didn't have all your notices up on either the radar page up on the other screen or whatever, CISCO released another vulnerability on the ASA on Sunday.
Oh wait, so this is a different one?
Well, it was
because we talked about one on last Thursday.
It's in addition to that one, so they released another one. Basically, this was an add-on. I put the links on the show notes, which they'll put up in an addendum. Basically, it's a remote code execution vulnerability in the XML parser. So, you may want to firewall your firewall. And you should put another Cisco's another ASA in front of the other first ASA. But it was another remote code execution vulnerability, so people could push stuff through, and it was an extension to the one. There was an original version of this that came out was a part of the EnergyWise vulnerabilities last year, and they released an update to that as well. They finalized that notice and said, I guess that had been patched. So if you're patched up on the EnergyWise vulnerability.
So this is a question for you and our audience as well, if you want to write in. Now, it's been some time since I've managed firewalls, and I managed some firewalls in some pretty big environments when I was actually at Brown University. Great team over there in the network team. I learned a lot and had a lot of fun. Were a lot of laughs with those guys. Not so much when we came time to update firewalls. Although it was interesting, we all had to maintain a certain sense of humor maintaining all of the firewalls that we did in doing update and maintenance on a large network. It's a pain in the ass to update a firewall. I mean, because it really, if it sits in line, and to do the updates, they were always very disruptive, very difficult to troubleshoot and test, sometimes difficult to like revert back to where you were before, maintain all of your rule sets and things of that nature. Is it still that case today?
Yes,
do you think
it is.
It's a nightmare, right?
It's just such a throttle point in your network because you know that is the key. Everything's going through there. So if you take that offline or you take it down, which is why doing them during the Super Bowl is such a good idea.
It could be.
It was like the lowest traffic moment of my networking year. Is like I used to do all my updates during Super Bowls and New Year's Day and all these kind of things when everybody else was having fun.
Because nobody cares. Yeah, nobody cares. There was
nobody on anything. They're all watching
But now,
TV.
if you've got a backup situation, the problems that I found with having a high availability firewalls was when the protocol that they used was usually horrible security-wise and often difficult to configure. I think that's probably a little easier now. But when you failed over, you had to make sure that the rule replication was always up to date. Otherwise, you failed over to a firewall that had an outdated rule set, and then someone was screaming. Hopefully, we've got some of those issues fixed. But also, like if you roll over to like your backup firewall, let's say, and then you update the first one to the latest version of firmware, then you roll back to it, and then you update the other. There's still a lot of things that can go wrong because now, like once you flip it over, like let's say you flip it over to a backup, update your primary, however you do it. If you update the backup first, now you've got firewalls that are high availability talking to each other that are on completely different firmware and revisions of the software, which in and of itself can cause problems.
That's how you do it. I mean, at least how I do it. I keep the old.
Budgeting wise, you need 2 of everything.
Well, but you can keep your old one. Don't give it back to Cisco and let them give you $50 for that thing you paid $10,000 for. Keep it current or at least as current as you can. You know, like I have 2 ASAs, so I have an old ASA that was smaller, and it's not going to support my whole enterprise, but I've got it, and it works, and it's fine, and it's not end of life or anything like that. Before that, I had an old PIX. Now the PIX was end of life, but it still worked.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean,
it's faster than most of the commodity stuff.
If you have a if you have a firewall setup where you're using really advanced techniques and things like that, you may have to do another trick, but. If you have something like that, what you need to do is build a basic firewall that will meet your needs. So you need 2 comps. So you have one comp that's your fancy AI-driven stuff that's making these really elaborate decisions, but another one that's just a basic rule set that will meet your needs. Not forever, but will meet your needs for the day. And this is also your sort of failover, fail-safe, everything goes south kind of situation because you may not be able to afford 2 of those big fancy things with the AI on board. And keeping 2 of those things up and current may be also very, very challenging, especially if it's learning or it's anything like that because it may have to train up. And so you need that kind of this is the sort of default. You know, we're going to put 2 extra guards on the front door, but the badge reader's down. So I got 2 people down there with the case files, and they're going to look every person's picture up. I mean, I've seen them do that in like top secret stuff before because the system was down and they couldn't verify. So bring that old one online and then do all your updates and test because this, like Paul said, this is one of the most awful, horrific tasks. It's like IPLing a mainframe, which is one of the most terrifying thing that ever happened in.
When I started at the university, I'm like, why do you guys use the term IPL? Like all the time. But I think I had heard that before because I worked in a point-of-sale company, software company, and they use that term, maybe even for some of the point-of-sale systems, but certainly for the AS400 systems. So I was actually familiar with that term, but I always thought it was weird. Initial program load? Is it the IPL?
Intentional power loss.
Oh. I thought it was...
That's not how I'm using it. So when we did on the mainframe, the IPL procedure was for intentional power loss. So that means you're going to take the mainframe down.
Intentional power loss.
I mean, because you never turn the mainframe off.
No.
I mean, we had a PDP-11 when I first worked at the university, and I got to power it down for its like final ride, and they had to get bolt cutters to cut the padlocks off the power buses because nobody had ever turned it off in like 15 years. It had never been taken down, and it was like there was no IPL procedure. I mean, obviously the idea would be, to bring it back up. In this case, it was just powering it down, but there was a whole procedure for our Honeywell. It was just all these steps to power the thing down safely. Right. And you had to turn this, and it had to be done in a certain order, and all this is very old Rube Goldberg fashion.
It's been so long, I forgot what the hell it stood for.
But IPL,
I always thought it was a weird.
Yeah, and IPLing a firewall is just about as terrifying as that. And so just I had people call me before and say, if I turn a firewall off, how do you get the running conf back? And I'm like, you don't have a backup of your running conf.
God.
I had a company once that had an unintended UPL.
Unintended. Is that like backhoe attenuation?
Well, they didn't know their generator didn't have any fuel in it, and the power went out, and all their network devices went down, and they had never saved their runnings to startups, and they didn't have backups of anything. And they're like, "Can you rebuild this?" And I'm like,
"Did someone steal the fuel out of their?"
I guess it just evaporated. They had any power outage in a long time or something. I don't know, but it didn't start.
It'd be a long time for a big tank to evaporate.
I don't think it.
There are vulnerabilities in your firewalls, and you're going to have to go through all the crap that Doug and I just talked about to do it. And better you than me. Just a heads up, we're sorry. Yeah. We feel for you.
Enjoy. Do it during the Super Bowl. You won't get to watch. Sorry, and hope you get it
that
done
already
before the
passed.
game's
That ship sailed. Maybe Valentine's Day.
That's my plan. Hi, honey. Second story was SANS announced that there's an Adobe Flash vulnerability being exploited 0 day in Korea. Apparently, this was part of the latest January release and Patch Tuesday release was that they had this exploit. They can embed, imagine this, they can embed in Microsoft Office or web pages more 0 day exploits on your system. So I did put a link to all that on there. Adobe said they would patch this in the next couple of weeks, but I know that everybody was updating Adobe the other day because there was some kind of a problem with Cisco. It wasn't the Cisco devices. It was the Cisco packet tracer stuff required this Adobe Flash Player update, and I just put that on my machine, and I saw this SANS vulnerability. So there was something like that coming out. Basically, one of the things I was going to talk about a little bit was prod dev or DevOps or however you want to describe it in terms of deep freezes. And deep freezing...
Am I making noises or is that you? Do you have a Ring doorbell?
I do. Were you hearing it?
I just heard it. It must have been your phone.
It's probably out of my hearing range. No wonder I never answer the bell. It's like our Ring doorbell never works at all. It's like, actually, I can usually hear it. I didn't hear it in here with the headphones on, though. But.
So, you would talk about deep freeze here.
Yeah.
I like this, but mostly because I relate it to what's going on in our studio, right? Like, I really want to virtualize. I want to minimize the amount of hardware that we have here. Yep. As we were talking, we've got some significant cooling and power issues here in the studio, largely because our systems have to be physically connected to a device for sending and or receiving video and sending and or receiving audio, which makes putting things in the cloud and virtualizing them kind of difficult because they have to interface with physical hardware that's going in and out of systems. But some of the control systems that are critical to the business, there's deep freeze technology. Like if something gets hacked, something goes terribly wrong, being able to just revert from snapshot on that system would be awesome.
And that's the old prod dev stuff from history, which is where I've got a dev environment that I'm testing things in. They're always working, but when I put something in prod, you ought to be good with it. And now that's the good. So that's the good side of prod dev kind of stuff. The bad is that you tend to get into this sort of quagmire, especially large enterprise stuff. Is what?
Giggity? Oh, a different quagmire.
I can't. I don't have the chin for it.
Well, your chair is making some heinous noises over there,
yeah,
too.
it's broken, I think. I was like, I'm going to need a chiropractor after this show. And it's like, maybe that's what's making the noise. Is it the chair?
I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe you know what? It's a squeak. It's my shoes are wet because it's snowing outside. My shoes are on the
I thought
rail.
I was just hearing things as a residual from the medication I had this morning.
Keeps hearing bend over. Bend over, Paul. But deep freeze was a thing that I like and I dislike, just like I love prod dev and I hate prod dev, because it's always going to be a problem where you get this choke point of stuff that's in production, and it's so hard to change.
That's the issue, right? Like if I create a clean build and then that's my deep freeze and I'm good, and then whatever's in production goes to shit and I restore from my production clean copy. If I've made changes, which we make tweaks all the time, especially, I mean, if you had any idea the number of like video capture devices, video cards, and audio capture and audio sending that's going on in our studio, like the drivers for that, we make tweaks to those all the time. And all those changes have to be replicated back into your clean image.
That and then there's the other issue of like the minute you get a clean issue or you get a clean image or whatever, and then you find out, oh yeah, there was an embedded vulnerability in this, and now I've got to fix it. But if you have a procedure like in large enterprise, it's not as easy as just as Paul and I running next door and starting to dive into it. It's like, okay, well first we'll form a committee and then we'll do an assessment, and it turns into this like, oh yeah, it's 6 to 8 months from now we can make a decision about this when we've had a chance to test it, which is really frightening. And one of the big downsides of deep freeze and prod dev and all those kind of things, because vulnerabilities, as we all know, come out so fast, which makes, especially with Adobe or something like that, I mean, there's a flash vulnerability every other week on something or other, and it's like patch, patch, patch. The problem with the prod dev model is that patch means I have to assess, I have to roll out, I have to determine, I have to test, I have to, and I may go through that process multiple times before I'm satisfied that this isn't going to have a massive global organization-wide impact that's going to bring everything to a screeching halt. And then all that comes out and Cisco says, oh yeah, and reboot your ASA. That shouldn't be too bad. It shouldn't take more than a day or two. And remember, same thing, startup and running comps. If you're going to do this, you better have a backup. So you have a dev and you roll it out and you wipe out. If you haven't saved, what Paul was saying about the drivers, if you haven't saved over on that original image or whatever, you got to be careful you don't have new stuff running in dev. And then there's this other thing that I like to talk about. I call it dev creep. Dev creep is where dev starts sneaking into your prod. Because deep freeze won't let you do that, but a lot of people sort of do this manually. They don't have any kind of a mechanism for it, so they say this is our image, and then somebody says, "Oh my God, there's this thing we got to fix." So they run out and they fix it, and it's fixed on this, but it's not fixed on the image. And then you have some kind of issue, and you try to roll back, and you lose all these changes, just like you lose that running conf. And then once that happens, all of a sudden you're sitting there on Monday morning going, "Yeah, everything's down." And we don't know why.
Well, and I also think there's a different kind of dev creep where you're doing so much in development. You have made changes. Maybe you've made 25 changes in development, and then you think you've tested it, and then you're ready to roll it into production. And we all know, as much as we try and keep development and production the same, there's always something different or something that we've missed. There's just always, anytime, and we know being in technology for as long as we have, and those listening, right? Anytime you take something and you roll it out new, it doesn't matter. Well, I mean, it does matter how well you've tested it, but sometimes
something's going to go wrong.
Something's going to go wrong. And if you've made a lot of changes in development, now you're pushing all those changes into production, that's a lot to troubleshoot because you've changed so much stuff.
And you won't always test it. I always tell people when I worked at the bank, I wrote this big piece of code, we rolled it out, crash. What? We tested everything we could think of. Why is it crashing? Don't know. We rebooted.
Because there's some other system that has some dependency on that.
It wasn't even that. We restarted it, and I had not done a good error trap on a user input because I asked people to put wire in, and this guy typed A for affirmative. Yeah. I just took, it was old school. I took a ball bat and a coffee can down there, and we just sorted it out.
Yeah, you know.
I'll let you figure out what I did with it. Write in your solutions. I have no idea what that meant. Speaking of hygiene, yeah, exactly. Speaking of hygiene, a new variant of Scarab tells you that it will shred 24 documents every day until you pay. And apparently, if you don't pay, it starts mailing little pieces of your software to you in the U.S. mail. I made that part up. Oh, I was like, they're really getting amusing and creative with the ransomware stuff. It's like now it's not just ransomware. It's like machine learning ransomware where it calls you on the phone and says, okay, you really want to watch this go? Here it goes. It's the pictures of your kids. Here it goes. Here they go. They're going. They're in the shredder. Listen to your kids screaming. Ah! I was like, who thinks this stuff up?
That's crazy.
But that particular story that came from the UK, and they were seeing this new version of Scarab. It was getting infections, and basically all that turns back into end users and prod dev. It's back to DevOps, because you're never going to stop your end users from doing this stuff. I mean, everybody's tried this. You give them training. It's kind of like sex harassment. They have training every year. Sex harassment keeps going. I guess it improves, and if you train them, they do get better, but that won't stop them, because these guys I get calls every day.
When you said U.S. mail, it just reminded me of a random story that I read. Okay. Because I've had a lot of reading time recently.
With a coffee can and a ball bat.
And there was this couple that worked at the U.S. Postal Service. I forget in what state. I want to say it was Kentucky, but it wasn't Kentucky. And basically, they were convicted of stealing marijuana from all the packages going through. Yay! But you think about it, he had some ridiculous nickname like Adam the Sniffer or something like that. Apparently, he could sniff out when people were sending marijuana. And I'm like, well, so how much marijuana could you possibly end up with in the U.S. Postal Service,
Apparently
right?
Quite a bit.
They raided his house, dude. Guess how much marijuana he had at his house? 60 pounds.
Wow.
Apparently,
all I could think
a lot of people are mailing.
All I could think of though was the guys rolling those big mail carts in, and the guy sticking his head down in it, going, "Hey, oh yeah, no, not that one. Oh man, I don't know what's in there, but you don't want it."
And his accomplice, the girlfriend or whatever, she had 10 pounds. So total 70 pounds of marijuana.
Who would have thought? I mean, I wouldn't imagine that you could get all that out of the U.S. mail. There's always been scams where people opened envelopes. They used to tell you don't ever mail cash and all this stuff, because there were people that could feel. I'd always heard about people that could feel the envelope and could tell if it had cash in it and stuff like that. It could be urban legend, but they probably just opened the envelopes. You get those in the mail and they've been opened, and you're like, what happened here? And you ever go in those packages been opened and they taped it all up and looked like a truck backed over it?
Yeah.
Okay, so train your end users. If you're dealing with this, ransomware is going to get you if you don't have mechanisms in place to deal with it. Prod dev can help you with that. Deep freeze kind of stuff can help you with that. But at the end of the day, if users download malware and they put the malware on the systems, you're done. You're going to get hosed, because even the best anti-malware stuff in the world is not going to stop some new variant that pops up in the wild that nobody's seen yet. And it may start shredding all your stuff 24 items a day. It would take a while to get through a whole hard drive at 24 a day. You could wait. I wonder what its I want to look at the code and see what the priority is. Does it like go after this first or that? Or?
Right. Craziness.
I was thinking pictures of your kids. I really think that would be a good one. And they could send you like a blurred out picture, in the email that says this one's going today. You like this one? Yeah, it's going. I like that. I thought it was creative. There was a new partnership forming between a bunch of big guys: Apple, Cisco, Allianz, and Aon. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Allianz?
No, Aon. A-O-N. Is that how you say A-O-N?
Aon?
Eon Flux?
Eon? That's what I was thinking is Ion Flux.
Yeah, that's got an E in it, though.
It does. It does.
So I don't know if it's Aon. They're forming an alliance to create risk management. So this is
which the anime... It was way better than the actual movie of Ion Flux.
Oh, yeah.
That goes without saying.
Well, Ion Flux was an old cartoon.
Was it MTV? It was MTV. Was it MTV?
Long before that, it was a drawn comic in Heavy Metal magazine. So that was the original one, I guess.
Anyway, so
these big guys are forming a new partnership in cyber risk management, and basically what they're doing is they're putting together a whole set of things that each one of them is going to do. Now, considering we started this story with Cisco ASA problems, it's a little bit worrisome. But basically what's happening is Apple and Cisco were coding up the tech foundation of this, and that starts being the basis for Allianz, which is an insurer, underwriting all of your operations. So if they underwrite you for ransomware or whatever, if you've adopted this the Cisco model and using the Cisco equipment for that piece of it, then basically what's going to happen is Aon, or however you say it. Sorry, guys, if I can't pronounce that, but Aon's going to do your cyber risk assessment. So they're going to come in, do this. You're going to use Cisco and Apple equipment. And then if you do all these things, Allianz is going to underwrite you. So it's this whole big, pentagram of control where you now have to use only Apple devices, you have to use only Cisco devices and all this. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, it's like if you trust all these guys and you think they'll make good things, and I mean, I use all the Cisco stuff, so I like Cisco. And I've used it for years and years and years, but I don't know how I feel about it for you if you get enhanced cyber insurance only by using this certain stuff. But maybe it's just like certified equipment. The government always had certified equipment and uncertified equipment, and you couldn't bolt uncertified stuff onto your certified network. That didn't help, but it was at least a start. So there was a little story there about that. And then I had a story about Appies. And Appies, the story was a real vague story, but it was like Appies post mushrooming security risk was this. And I brought this up. We were talking to Summer earlier about the cloud. And one of my things about Appies is that in the old days, so the olden days, when we did things with hammers and chisels, and we wrote Fortran code on stone tablets, you had to kind of tend to develop the whole piece. If you wanted a piece of software like at the bank, we owned all the pieces of it, so they were all ours. And maybe I didn't code every single piece of every single code, but I at least knew what that was. So if it was there and we were using this other thing,
you were in some kind of design meeting for it, or read the documentation, or talked about it at the water
I had
cooler.
The code.
Yeah, or
the code was understandable. So this was this library that Chuck wrote was this long. It was 800 lines, and I could go through it. And
so Chuck was the only developer in existence that wrote code that other people can understand.
Exactly.
We need to hire Chuck. That'd be awesome.
I think he went crazy.
Not surprised if you wrote understandable code. That's
worked at a bank, was a programmer.
Nobody writes code that other people understand.
Exactly.
Ever.
You have to be twisted in some kind of really unique way. But I mean, as this grew, so down through the ages, as all this stuff grew up and it got bigger and bigger, now we use so many Appies when we write code. So, I mean, all of us do it. I mean, even if you just use something like cout and indle, in C, you're using an Appy already. You've bolted on a big Appy just to use those little things. So, and how many people actually know what's in that?
Are you saying Appy because API is too much work to say?
Yeah, okay, it's my little way.
I wasn't sure we were talking about mozzarella sticks and buffalo wings.
Well, if I say Appy like 50 times a day, think how much time I'm saving. It's enough time to get drunk in the evening. So I just
spoken like a true engineer.
You got to say those microseconds.
So we've talked about this on our various shows, and I'm looking to do more content on it because I think it's a much larger problem. Someone has posed a question to me, and I'm like, dude, I don't have the answer. Like, they're like, we're interfacing with all these APIs. Like, what do we have to know if they're secure that once we interface with them? I mean, we have that problem today.
Right.
We interface with the social media APIs, and I think not only knowing if your API interface is secure, it's one problem. I think the other major problem that you have with all these APIs is how you secure the secrets and the access to them.
Yeah.
How do I authorize my application, or how does that API authorize me to communicate with it and tie that to an account? And then how do I store and use those keys securely? And it's not something I had to think about until we started developing software that automatically posted shows to YouTube like we have, and we have to manage and maintain all of that, and it becomes a big hot mess. CyberArk bought Conjure.
Okay.
They've got a solution for that. I want to say Hexadyte. It might be Hexadyte has a solution for that. There's some open source stuff. There's newer companies opening up in this space that are helping you secure those secrets, that are helping you, like securing and looking at the APIs is even a slightly different thing from securing and storing the secrets and the encryption that goes along with using some of those APIs. So yeah, I think it's something we need to explore more. I think it's a bigger topic than people realize, and I was glad to see you added that.
Well, and the other piece of it, I mean, beyond just the secrets that's really scary is start thinking about AIs. As you start thinking about AIs, and the AIs start writing appies, and now you've got this library that's got 8 million lines of code in it that you have no idea how it was written. It was written by an AI. I mean, I know that's not real common, but it's coming. And all of a sudden, you've got this giant bolt-on, and you got 5 more of them, and 3 of them are in the cloud, and you just pull all these things in, and they're being patched and updated and changed on the fly. There is no way developers are going to be able to go through that stuff and evaluate it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if it's SLAs, if it's insurance, or what it is that's going to make it such that you're not developing new code that has huge vulnerabilities on the back end that you don't even have any control over because you have no idea how those vulnerabilities work or what's in those appies. All over the place, and it's really worrisome to me because I've always worried about libraries because I have sort of library paranoia and library envy and all these other kind of things, and it's just like I don't know, it's just a line of it's an include, you know, and you throw it in there, but you start looking in those things and you go, I don't even know what this is doing, and there's 80,000 lines of code I put in here just so I could make the character's hat red. You know, or something like that. And when I was teaching game programming, we were bolting all these things on, you know, and it's like all of a sudden they're like, well, what does this do? And I'm like, I don't know, but if you use this method, it'll make his hat red, you know, and they're like, oh, cool, you know, and I bolt it in there. Who knows what it does? Finally, the last one I had was mastering security in the Zettabyte era. So they were talking about the global internet traffic will be 95 times greater this year than it was last year. I mean, it's just like massive amount of data. And as we start combining big data in the cloud with AI, and we start using that, so you're going to start using that too, because all of a sudden there's going to be another kind of API, which is going to be these big data repositories that you can access. So you're sitting there and you want to push videos out. If there's a big data appy out in the cloud, it wouldn't really be an appy, but you know what I mean. And you can query that thing on the fly. You're going to have massive amounts of access and input to you that you can use to determine market share or market niches and all kinds of little slices and tidbits and whatever. Some of these are going to be AI managed. Basically, as that grows, it's just going to make the threat horizon become like massive. So be resilient. Out in the world. If you didn't watch the earlier segment, you don't know what that means. And it's not a cure for scabies, but there is no cure for scabies.
Awesome. Well, Doug, thank you so much for appearing on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.